Welcome back for another episode of the 5G Guys. I'm Wayne Smith, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dan McBaugh.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode. This is one of the first FLASHPODs that Wayne and I have done, responding to some news that came out this last week related to wireless. So we thought we'd jump on and do a quick response, what Wayne and I think might be the outcome or the results of this news. First, I have to apologize. My voice is shot from a great football game this weekend. But as they say, the show goes on, right? So the news specifically that we're talking about is last week, the FAA came out with what they call a special airworthiness information bulletin. This was on November 2nd, if you're listening to this in the future. But they basically announced that they had concerns about this new spectrum that AT&T and Verizon were getting ready to deploy on 5G. Spectrum is called C-band. It's spectrum that was auctioned off, raised $81 billion for the federal government at auction, of which Verizon spent $45 billion and AT&T spent another $23 billion. So we're talking pretty high stakes here. The C-band is a band of spectrum that is very near a band of spectrum that airplanes use for radio altimeters to help, pilots apparently in, landing in bad weather and things like that. And this issue has been around for a long time. Wayne, I think you said you knew a little bit about some moves that the FAA made in the past to sort of address the potential for this new C-band to interfere with those altimeters in a way to mitigate that. You found a little research on that?
Yeah, I think, a little bit from my side, what drew me to the news is that we know that 2022 is going to be a big year for the carriers, right? And for our company, Vertex, we're ramping up to deal with that demand. And then when you see something that stops this, it was a red flag for me. But yeah, so I did a little research. It appears that the rule change in all commercial airlines had to use linear frequency modulation or constant wave in 2010. And as of 2010, about 25,000 aircraft have at least one radio altimeter, right? So, the rules changed 11 years ago, and definitely for all commercial airline, how they operate. And so that's why I think the FCC felt it was okay. There's a lot of use cases around the world of using this spectrum, and they hadn't had any interference claims by any of the other airline agencies throughout the world. So I thought they felt pretty good about rolling this out.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's how I kind of came up to it. And then it definitely impacts, 1 month is probably not a lot during the holidays, but, I did.
So to clarify.
Yeah.
Verizon and AT&T last week, in response to the FAA, said, okay, we'll delay our 5G deployments 1 month because they were supposed to start deploying December 5th of 2021. So they're saying, okay, we'll wait till January 5th of 22. That's basically the news that came out, right?
That's the news, yeah. And so it hasn't. I think the federal government's working on another response, or a mandate for this to move forward. I did read another article that said that, we know that 5G brings some estimates as crazy numbers, but 1.5 trillion over the next few years in revenue. It creates millions of new jobs, but every delay in this rollout will cost $25 billion.
Wow.
Right. In economic growth. And so 1 month is probably not bad. It's $25 billion, but start to combine it, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. So that's why I think it's such a hot button topic. And although that the government had the wireless carriers, they knew this for the last couple of years. They're going to release this spectrum. Nothing out of the FAA or the aviation industry until now.
Mm-hmm. So, very, very 11th hour announcement by the FAA. Definitely has some folks scratching their heads about what might be going on as to why they had such a last minute announcement. As you said, Japan, Europe, countries all over the world have already deployed 5G at the same frequency band, and no adverse effects have been reported for radio altimeter landing assistance. Hey, real quick, a quick word of thanks to today's sponsor, Vertex Innovations. For over 17 years, Vertex has been building the nation's wireless and broadband networks, providing project management, network engineering, and construction oversight are just some of the ways Vertex helps their clients. So if you're looking for more of a partner to help you with your wireless network designs, construction, implementation, or operations, reach out to Vertex. You can find them at vertex-us.com. That's VERTEX-us.com. What I think is curious, or not curious, but very interesting, was that I think Verizon and AT&T have a pretty good leg to stand on that everything's going to be fine, yet they did choose to voluntarily delay a month. So I think that's kind of curious, kind of interesting what the positioning is there as to why they might be voluntarily doing that. And some people raise their hand and ask, well, where's T-Mobile in all this? Well, T-Mobile does not have the huge C-band spectrum that from the auction. They have some, but they've been deploying at 600 meg and at 2.5 gigahertz 5G for the last year. So that's how they've gotten a leg up on Verizon and AT&T. So from T-Mobile's perspective, they stand to benefit from this delay and not be hurt by it. So that's an interesting aspect to it as well. But I'm curious what your thoughts are. You have any guesses as to why Verizon and AT&T may have voluntarily taken this delay on, given that they don't feel it's technically an issue?
Yeah, I mean, this is my theory, and theory meaning best guess. But if you look around the world and where we're at post the pandemic and post issues around that, is that we have supply chain issues. And supply chain issues in our space, we know chips, but components, a lot of the, I guess, product to deploy these types of networks or this technology comes, from China and around the world. And they're not all manufactured in the U.S. So you have fiber issues, antenna issues, mounting issues, all of these different components. I actually believe this delay helps. I think the carriers are saying, hopefully this will unclog some of the supply chain. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think a lot of their product is probably here or in a port somewhere, but because of the truck delays, the port delays, whatever it is in supply chain, that's a theory for me. You know what I mean? And I think once they start to open up, this gives them a little breathing room to relook at maybe some deployment priorities. Mm-hmm. I think it's all about, as we advance the growth of the network and, we continue to build, there's a lot more data out there. Thankfully for AI and the different collection methods, the companies at that scale, it takes them a bit to take that data and say, all right, we have supply chain issues, but we know maybe we can take some of the larger tier 1 cities in California near the supply chain and get those deployed first. So they may be looking at strategies along, hey, what can we do first? What can we do next? And this amount of time gives them ample enough time to maybe change a plan or make some, how we're going to move product, how we're going to get it to the field and our vendors to build. But that's my theory on it. I don't know.
Well, and all of the wireless carriers operate on a fiscal year that syncs up with the calendar year as well. So, having a large initiative that starts December 5th really doesn't sync well with the way they do business anyways, right?
Yeah. I mean, seed funding, right? Which means pulling funding back and then cleaning all that up. So I think they would, to your point, they would rather do it new fiscal year.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's, I think our quick FLASHPOD, quick take on what's going on here. It'll be interesting to watch though. Anytime that you have, billions of dollars from the private sector being discussed with a federal agency impacting putting that capital to work, it always makes for an interesting news and dynamics. So it'll be interesting to see how this sorts out over the next month and the dialogues that'll happen between the FAA, the FCC, and AT&T and Verizon. So, but with that, we do know that Verizon and AT&T aren't backing off their plans. Verizon still plans to cover 100 million people next year of new 5G service in this band. And AT&T's predicted, 70, 75 million new people covered by 5G in this band next year. So next year is going to be an interesting year for sure.
Yeah, one other thought comes to mind. It's really interesting about here in the U.S. is that technology, even though we move really fast, there's a lot of segment of collectors and hobbyists that play with old technology, no matter what it is here. If you think about old cars, look at the old car market here. It's a multi-billion-dollar market. Mm-hmm. Even though you could argue that the new technology is so far advanced, people still like to tinker. And I think some of the aircraft, and these people, it's the same model. There's a lot of old aircraft out there that people are hobbyists that fly on the weekend. They're not doing commercial things. They're just enjoying the hobby of flight, And so I think that those are some of the other reasons that compound these kind of technology changes, where you have this segment of the population that are hobbyists and they don't want to see the change because it changes to what their hobbies and what they're allowed to do. So,
right. So they've got an old radio frequency altimeter on their plane that may be susceptible because it hasn't been updated to the new standards that were set in 2010.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a whole group. So you hand it to them. We live in a culture that people have indiscriminate income, that they can do a hobby. And because a lot of the technology was developed here instead of other countries, there's a lot of that old product out there. Mm-hmm. Easy to access. Like if you wanted to go find an old car, you could do it tomorrow, maybe spend $1,000 and you're into the old car business. Now, whatever one it was, but
yeah, if the auto industry, the U.S. Department of Transportation told me I had to put an airbag in my 69 Cougar, I wouldn't do it. Right?
No, you wouldn't.
No.
You wouldn't.
Yeah.
Nor would you maybe not take it on a cross-country road trip when the speeds are now 75 miles an hour or 85 in some places. So
That's true.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, we live in an amazing time when we always think forward in our podcast. There's a lot of folks still loving, the history of technology, whether it's in aircraft or cars or even radios and different things. We live in an environment where people can, exercise their ability to do those things. So,
yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Well, great. Well, thanks for jumping on. Last apologies again, having a shot voice for this one, but hopefully that's some interesting news for those that are following us on a week-to-week basis. So until our next episode, have a good one.
Yep. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the 5G Guys. For more resources and to connect with Dan and Wayne, check out their website at 5gguys.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that follow button and share this episode with your friends and family.